Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel. I'm so glad you've joined me this evening, and welcome wherever you are in North America or the rest of the world. It's so lovely to be with you here tonight, and I've got such a fantastic story for you that you're absolutely going to love. I know many people have asked the very important question has ever a Bigfoot body been discovered? Well, I think this story is going to answer that question for you. And I think you're going to find it fascinating. So let's get started. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, because I've got so many lovely stories that you don't want to miss out on. So let's get started. Dear Sarah and all your listeners, I grew up in Nashville in Tennessee in the 1950s, and I am the first to admit that I am no spring chicken. I grew up in a very modest home surrounded by vast areas of pristine forest, rolling hills, meadows, shimmering silver lakes, and spectacular valleys. It was a dreamy, idyllic lifestyle for me growing up, and although we did not have all the material things that kids have today, we really did have wonderful childhoods that I would have not swapped for anything in the world. My generation are much more reserved than the youth of today are, and it was after much persuasion from my granddaughter Carol that I decided I would tell you my Bigfoot story that could be a little shocking for your listeners. So fasten your seatbelts and I will take you on a ride to Sasquatch country. In those days we did not know the term Bigfoot, but believe me, there were so many sightings of the hairy man all over Tennessee. In those days, if you had an encounter like that, you would most definitely keep your mouth shut, much like they do today. There does seem to be a stigma attached to believing in the hairy man. But believe me, he does exist, because I've seen him myself on 3 separate times in my life. The first time I saw a Bigfoot was when I was only 10 years old. I was playing with my little sister in a meadow where we were using the long grasses to try and make ourselves little baskets. Suddenly we saw a little hairy creature of about 4 feet tall watching us. He was peeking at us from behind a tree. At first he seemed terribly shy and evasive, but after a while he became curious and even friendly. He even started to mimic us as we made our basket, much to our amusement. At the time we thought the creature was terribly funny, but we did not know what he was. He was covered with black hair and he had brown, mischievous, naughty-looking eyes. I believe he was a juvenile Sasquatch. The next time I saw the creature, I was about 21 years old and had returned home from church. I was very upset that day because my best friend had started dating the boy that I fancied. In a state of emotional turmoil, I took myself for a long walk and sat there by the large lake, crying my eyes out. I suddenly saw this creature moving towards the water with the most incredible grace. When I watched him, I was spellbound. At first, I thought it was a bear, but they do not walk with the same fluidity. It was big, and it was tall and wide, and was covered with mop-like cinnamon chocolate-coloured hair. The creature paddled in the water, and I think he took a dip, because he did start to swim, and then got out and shook his hair like a wet dog would, and the water went all over the place. The creature never noticed me, but I watched it glide away into the woods, and it was some sight, because that creature was so incredibly graceful, and yet at the same time so large. The final time I saw a Bigfoot on our land was after my father had been shooting. He thought that he had killed a black bear, but he accidentally killed a Bigfoot. I remember he brought it back home and decided to bury the creature. You see, we did not know what that creature was. My dad was extremely angry with himself for killing the thing because it was so human in its appearance. This creature was dark brown like a black bear, about 6 foot tall and very large and muscular. My dad said it weighed 700 pounds. Also, this creature's face was like a primate, but it also looked very human. We buried the creature and prayed over it because we felt incredibly guilty about this accidental death. We felt bad for ending his life, but it really was a case of misidentification. During the night we heard the most god-awful howls on our land, and it really did sound like something grieving. Even my mother was certain it was the Bigfoot's family crying over his death, because there were multiple howls all over the valley. My dad actually went into the garden and made a formal apology to the creature and creatures for taking his life. That is how terribly wretched and guilty my dad felt. The next day, the most extraordinary thing had happened. The grave had been dug up and the dead Bigfoot had been removed. We really believe his family came back to retrieve him. Every night for a whole week, we heard that sad howling coming from all over the valley. And even the locals were commenting about the sad howls that they were hearing. Some people thought those wooded areas were haunted, but I knew better, and I was keeping my mouth tightly shut. My dad never forgave himself for killing that Bigfoot, and I think it really traumatized him every day of his life. But those other Bigfoots never retaliated in any way. I always believe in my heart of hearts that they knew it wasn't a purposeful killing and was an accident. So there you are. That is my story. I know it's not very long, but I do hope you enjoyed it. Well, all I can say is I do think that is a wonderful, wonderful story. And I think it probably is the case that there have been people out there that have accidentally killed the hairy man and haven't known what to do about it, and perhaps they've covered it up and buried the body, and that's why we probably haven't come across many of them. And also I think that these creatures are incredibly intelligent, so they probably do bury their own. And why these creatures came back to retrieve their friend's dead body, maybe it suggests that they bury their own. I wouldn't be surprised if they do, because they are extremely intelligent. I don't know what you guys think. I do know that the howling across the valley does show that these creatures do have a sensitivity. They clearly are emotional, like we are. And if we were grieving the loss of somebody, we would behave, well, not quite in the same way, but we certainly would be very, very heartbroken. Anyway, I thank you so much, and thank you for joining me, and good night. Until next time, goodbye.